January 1945. Deep in the frozen forests of Belgium, amid blinding snow and blistering winds, the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's final major offensive on the Western Front, was still raging. Tens of thousands of Allied troops were locked in brutal close-quarters combat against Germany's seasoned divisions. History. Inside an austere command trailer, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery sat alone, not staring at a battlefield map, nor reviewing casualty reports, but at a typewriter. His fingers tapped with intent, producing words that were meant to change the strategic landscape of the war. But what he was typing wasn't orders against the enemy. They were a secret telegram to London, and they revealed far more than military instructions. They revealed a fracture among allies. Montgomery's telegram. Political dynamite. Montgomery's message to the British High Command was sharp and cutting. Instead of merely critiquing strategy, he crossed into direct commentary on the effectiveness of American forces. The tone suggested that the American army was disorganized, not simply outmaneuvered, and that without British involvement, the Allied front might have crumbled. It wasn't just criticism, it was political maneuvering. Montgomery believed that if he could persuade London that American command was incompetent, he could gain greater influence over overall strategy. But by bypassing the established chain of command and openly disparaging America's role, he lit a fuse that would shake the Allied coalition. Wikipedia. The alliance on edge. At the center of the Allied force stood General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander. Eisenhower, known for managing egos and coordinating multinational forces, was not a battlefield genius in the mold of Patton or Rommel, but he was a master of coalition leadership. Across from him stood Montgomery, meticulous, confident, and increasingly insular in his world view. Montgomery had gained fame for his victories earlier in the war, and by late 1944 he saw himself as a senior strategist whose judgment should dictate operations. Over time, this confidence hardened into a belief that American forces lacked discipline and cohesion. This simmering tension set the stage for a confrontation far more explosive than any battlefield engagement. The Battle of the Bulge, a tough test. Hitler's Ardennes offensive struck on December 16, 1944. The surprise assault carved a massive salient into the Allied line, threatening to split their forces and turn the tide once again. As snow blanketed the forest floors and temperatures plummeted, American troops bore the brunt of the assault. History. Despite severe hardship and overwhelming odds, U.S. soldiers dug in at strategic points, most famously in Bastogne, where surrounded paratroopers defiantly responded "nuts" to a German surrender ultimatum. American resistance slowed the German advance long enough for reinforcements to arrive and stabilize the front. History. By the end of January 1945, Allied forces had pushed the Germans back. It was a costly victory. Roughly 75,000 American casualties, including nearly 20,000 killed, making it the bloodiest battle the U.S. Army fought on the Western Front. Arlington National Cemetery, the press conference that ignited a fire. On January 7, 1945, Montgomery gave a press conference that would be remembered almost as prominently as the battles themselves. In a half-hour speech before dozens of journalists, he spoke at length about the Ardennes campaign. But his words didn't honor joint sacrifice. They emphasized British planning and downplayed American contributions. While Montgomery praised certain aspects of the Allied effort, many listeners, particularly American commanders, felt that his language subtly suggested American forces were lesser participants, if not liabilities in the campaign. This wasn't merely poor diplomacy, it was a public relations storm. Back in Allied headquarters, Montgomery's remarks enraged many American commanders. General Omar Bradley, known for his calm demeanor, expressed visceral frustration when he read the press transcript. The controversy was no longer about troop movements. It was now about trust and respect between allies. Behind the scenes, Eisenhower drafted a stern cable to political leadership, effectively an ultimatum. Either Montgomery's public influence must be curtailed, or Eisenhower might resign. Allied harmony hung by a thread. Churchill speaks out. At this precarious moment, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill stepped forward with words that would reframe the narrative. In a speech to Parliament on January 18, 1945, Churchill stated that the Battle of the Bulge was undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war, and he predicted it would be regarded as an ever-famous American victory. His message was clear. American troops had performed heroically, and their sacrifices were not only central to the Allied effort, but worthy of recognition. Encyclopedia Britannica Churchill further cautioned that when recounting the story of this battle, credit should be fairly shared, and undue emphasis should not be placed on British actions at the expense of American contributions. Scott Manning. This statement, delivered at a critical juncture, was more than praise. It was political balm. Churchill recognized that if the alliance fractured, the overall capacity to defeat Germany would be imperiled. Montgomery's reckoning. In the wake of Churchill's remarks and mounting diplomatic pressure, Montgomery's position became increasingly awkward. Though he had long believed in his own indispensability, he was forced to acknowledge the friction his public comments had caused. Montgomery eventually conceded that holding that press conference was a mistake and attempted to clarify his remarks, but the episode had already damaged his standing with many American leaders. Allied command would henceforth proceed with greater mutual respect and clearer lines of cooperation. Aftermath and strategy. Although tensions were high, the alliance endured. Eisenhower remained in command, and strategic planning continued. When Allied forces later crossed the Rhine River into Germany, American armies spearheaded significant thrusts, while British and Commonwealth forces played supportive roles. History. By May 1945, the Axis surrender was signed, and the war in Europe came to an end. The Battle of the Bulge stood as a testament to resilience and sacrifice, especially by American forces, whose determination turned back one of Hitler's final gambits. Words as powerful as bullets. The story of Montgomery's telegrams and Churchill's response is not simply footnote in military history. It is a lesson in diplomacy, leadership, and alliance politics. Churchill's declaration reframed the narrative, preserving unity at a moment when pride, misunderstanding, and miscommunication threatened to split the Allied command. His words acknowledged American sacrifice and helped maintain cohesion at a decisive hour. National Park Service. In coalition warfare, victories are won not only by strategy and strength, but by mutual respect and shared honor. And in the bitter winter of 1945, that principle was tested and ultimately preserved.